What's up, guys, and welcome to the very first episode on Music Forever. And today we will be talking about none other than the Carpenters. Now, the majority of you, I'm going to assume, either don't know who they are or really don't care for that kind of music, which is understandable. But today we're going to be delving into more of the history of them and how they came to be, how they were when they were in their prime, how they ended. And just a lot of really interesting facts about the band, because this band has an incredible story. And it's just something that I felt like I needed to share with you guys. Now, before we start off, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys just a few clips of their more famous songs, stuff that you might have already heard of but didn't realize it was the Carpenters. So go ahead and check it out.
Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? We're lost in this masquerade. We've only just begun to live. California dreaming on such a winter's day. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down. Merry Christmas, darling. We're apart, that's true.
Now, I'll give you guys just a little bit of taste of their come-up story.
Ultimately, we heard about this annual Hollywood Bowl Battle of the Bands. When we went through the quarterfinals, we won those. The semifinals, we won those. When the time came for prizes to be handed out, well, we won that too. And this is without Karen singing a note. I mean, this is purely instrumental.
Now, it is interesting to note that a lot of their songs through the decades have been used in pop culture, be it TV shows like The Simpsons.
Why do birds suddenly appear?
Or movies like 1408. Their music has kind of transcended them as a band, almost, because this was a band that was in the 70s, and they're still being used in media today. That just kind of shows you how much of an impact they had overall. Now, what shows that even more is that 11 of their songs would end up on the top 5 of the Billboard charts. 7 of them, I believe, were #1 on the Billboards whenever they came out. That's pretty impressive. As far as I'm concerned, in their genre, they pretty much ran the 70s and some of the 80s. They not only influenced pop culture, they also influenced the music industry. They've changed the way things are. One example is in the song Goodbye to Love. They were actually the first band to ever have a guitar solo in a ballad. That had never been done before. That was never done before this song.
One night I'm sitting at home, and the phone rings, and I pick it up, Tony, this is Karen Carpenter. I didn't know who it was. I said, very funny. And she was like, this is Karen Carpenter. All of a sudden I realized it was her. My heart raced. It was just incredible. I mean, you're talking to one of your idols. And there's, well, Richard and I down here at A&M, we're working on a record right now, and we think you'd be perfect for what we're doing right in this song. Anyway, they were working on Goodbye to Love. Big spot comes in the middle, right where the solo is, and stops, and Richard goes, that's where you play. And I'm thinking, okay, what would be right for this record? I have to think like what would be right for Carpenter's record. So I played something that was, soft, easy. I just tried to stay out of the way. And it obviously didn't happen. Richard said, no, just go, just burn. Today, and from then on, it's very commonplace. You hear these big power ballads, beautiful ballads with raging guitar solos in them. Nobody had ever done that before. This was totally, crazy. I take a tiny bit of credit for it, for being there and playing it, but it wasn't my idea. It was, Richard's, and he was always the guy with the great ideas.
Now, one more interesting thing to note on that song, while I am talking about that song, I would like to mention that before emo music ever existed, the Carpenters were emo. They have some of the most depressing music I have ever heard, and yet it's so beautiful at the same time. But while we're talking about Goodbye to Love, let me just go ahead and play you the first few seconds of that song. Go ahead and listen to the first few lines of this. and tell me if you know of an emo song that is sadder than this shit.
I'll say goodbye to love. No one ever cared if I should live or die.
Isn't that depressing? Doesn't that make you want to cry? Like, God. So they really did kind of set the bar without it even knowing it. Not only did they write love songs, but they had a few songs in their career that were a little weird, where the subject matter was aliens. One that comes to mind is Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft. I believe, yeah, it's quite the mouthful. They had a few songs like this, and it was a bit odd when it was sprinkled in with all these love songs. But they really did try to branch out and try something different, and I think it worked. It's definitely interesting to listen to, 40, 50, 60 years later. Now, I do want to note that a lot of their songs, they did not actually write themselves. They either had writers, or they there's some really interesting stories as to how they got some of their songs. One of my favorites being for the song We Only Just Begun. Go ahead and check this out real quick.
There was a company that was going to do a commercial for Crocker Bank. It was going to show a young couple getting married, and it was My Lucky Break.
We've only just begun to live. So much of life ahead. We'll find a place where there's room to grow. We've only just begun.
I sang it in the commercial, and it's interesting. There was an immediate response to it. Richard Carpenter called, and he asked if there was a full-length version of the song. Well, if I would have lied through my teeth if there wasn't, because to get a Carpenters record at that point was going to be a big deal.
Now, you go ahead and find me a band where they got their inspiration for one of their most popular songs from a bank commercial. That's pretty different. And they have a few stories like this where that's how they got the lyrics for their songs, is in circumstantial stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's not really anything you come across nowadays. Now, this is what I believe makes this band the most interesting out of all of that stuff. Karen Carpenter was originally a drummer. She liked to drum. That was her instrument. That's what she did. She did not consider herself a singer.
She asked for a set of drums. And of course, my parents were a little bit dubious about this, having gone through the flute and the accordion, which went nowhere. She took to them with nothing flat, all the exotic time signatures and all of that.
In fact, even when it was all said and done, she considered herself a drummer who just happened to sing. Karen Carpenter never considered herself a singer, even though she had one of the most beautiful, angelic voices the world has ever heard. It's quite fascinating to think that there could have been some sort of alternate reality where this band existed, but Karen Carpenter stayed the drummer. If that had happened, I guarantee you they never would have made it anywhere near as big as they did. There's just no way. This kind of drove her brother crazy, and so what they ended up compromising, and they would just have her come up to the front and only sing on the ballads. But the rest of the time, she was in the back on the drums, because that's where she felt like she was supposed to be.
I finally made the decision that I needed to speak with Karen about actually fronting the group. Certainly she was the star of the duo, but she was only 5'4", and the audience couldn't see a great deal of Karen. So what Karen and I decided upon was, for the ballads, she would get up and sing. But I have to say, in her heart of hearts, I still think she considered herself, for as great a singer as she was, a drummer who sang.
And she was an amazing drummer, talented, especially for, you want to talk about, in that day and age, there being a woman drummer. Not only is she a female drummer, but she's got the spotlight. that had never happened. That was very uncommon back then. So that was a pretty big deal. So, I mean, you want to talk about female empowerment and feminism and all that stuff. Hello, ladies. Check out the Carpenters. That's about as female empowering as you can get. She was the center of attention, and she was the drummer, the singer. I mean, ladies, where are you with the Carpenters? Come on. That's one of the most inspirational female stories I've ever heard that I know of. It's an amazing tale.
What I've got they used to call the blues. Nothing is really wrong. Feeling like I don't belong.
I mean, just simply one of the most amazing voices to listen to. And I really think there's no denying that. And then her brother would come in with the instrumentation and the melodies and all that stuff. And you just listen to it and it's so sad and emotional. But at the same time, they were able to make it beautiful. And that's something that's really hard to do. It's not something that you hear a lot of nowadays. Now, they had eventually made it so big that they had multiple variety hour shows. Multiple. Imagine if Alicia Keys had 2 or 3 specials on TV. That's just something that doesn't happen nowadays. But they were so successful in what they did that they were on TV all the fucking time. Here, I'll play a few clips of various variety hours that they did. And this is just a few. Go ahead and check it out.
We've only just begun.
See, she's at it again, drumming. People are always asking me why Karen plays the drums.
I can answer that in 2 words. Why not?
Music, 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 which became our final special only because of what ultimately happened with Karen, is what I consider the best of them all. There's no shtick in it, no canned laughter in it, no skits. It's just music, start to finish. While we were making it, ABC wasn't very happy with it because, of course, there was no shtick in it. The word that had gotten back was, what the hell do they think this is? A PBS special?
Now, we are going to get into the unfortunate part of their whole story. Now, Karen Carpenter had been suffering from bulimia for a long time. And back then, no one really knew what bulimia was. It wasn't really a wide-known thing. Even her brother had no idea that that was an actual thing. So they didn't really know what they were dealing with. They knew that something was wrong with her. They couldn't quite pinpoint it. And eventually, one day, it got to be too much, and she unfortunately died from bulimia. I think she's only 37 years old.
There was a kind of a shadow that I saw over the smile, that fell across the smile in all the recent pictures. Well, I suspected that something was wrong because she was so terribly thin, so terribly thin. And I didn't know at the time a lot about eating disorders, you know.
I remember saying to Karen, I don't know what you're doing, but you've got to stop it, you know. And finally, when she left my dressing room, I gave her a hug, and she was so thin. And that was the last time I saw her.
When we first started to notice the problem in Karen, only a few experts knew the term anorexia nervosa or bulimia. We just knew something was wrong. It had gone beyond dieting, but we didn't know what the hell we were dealing with.
Which is unfortunate. To think of the things she could have done with the rest of her life, with how talented she was, and to have all that taken away from her, it's really unfortunate. And that's eventually how the story ends for the Carpenters. Now, Rick Carpenter would eventually go solo, and I think he had 1, maybe 2 albums with doing that. He had a couple of the guys that were in the Carpenters in that as well. And of course that didn't go very successfully, and that's pretty much where the train stopped for them. But I mean, you want to talk about achieving the unachievable in your music career. They did that, and they did it more than once. Very impressive band, very impressive feats that they had climbed and conquered. There's really just not enough that can be said about the Carpenters. You can say what you want about the genre they were in and the type of music they made and whether you like it or not, but at the end of the day, music is subjective, and whether you like it or not, you have to admit they have a very incredible story. Enough so that I felt the need to make an episode about it for you guys. Now, I do recommend checking out the documentary that I used the clips from. It's a fantastic documentary if you can find it. You can find their music everywhere on YouTube. I'd recommend checking it out. They got some really good stuff. That was lame. And with that being said, guys, that's going to do it for me. That'll end the episode for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you found it informative. I hope this was at least interesting to watch and y'all stayed through the whole thing. If you did, I commend you. Stick around. I got a lot more coming out. I think you guys will be pleased with the type of content I'm going to be coming out in the future. Don't worry, I'm not going to be covering bands that do love songs or anything like that. So if you guys like the video, make sure you click like and subscribe. It would really help me out. Until then, I'll see you guys next video.
The Carpenters.
It's a whole new bag, it's a whole new sound. So crisp, potato chips by more tons. The really fresh one. It's a whole new bag, it's a whole new sound.
By Morton's. The really fresh ones.